What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. All right, so we are going to continue our coverage over Captain America Streets of Poison. Now, this was a 7-part story arc that came out in the early 1990s. Now, we are already covered the first 4 chapters of this storyline, and so today's video, we're going to cover the last 3 chapters of Streets of Poison. But here is a quick reminder of what's going on so far when it comes to this storyline. So, starting off with Steve Rogers, you see, for Steve Rogers, he is currently on a mission right now to put an end to a new drug out there called ice. And let me explain why. You see, for Steve Rogers, in our last video, he had found out that a character known as Fabian, who works for the Avengers support crew, was unfortunately on drugs, a brand new drug called ice. And so for Steve Rogers, his main goal was to shut down the entire operation. The problem is for Steve Rogers is that once he found a warehouse that had a huge supply of the brand new drug called ice, well, the whole entire warehouse was blown up. And so the ice drug was able to get into the bloodstream of Steve Rogers. And here comes the big problem. You see, with the brand new drug of ice, but also his super soldier serum, it is a bad mix. And so right now you have Steve Rogers being more aggressive than usual, but also becoming very paranoid. And so right now is Steve kind of going against everybody who's just trying to help him out. Like, for example, Daredevil. You see, for Matt Murdock, he ran to Steve Rogers one night and realized there was something wrong with Steve Rogers. And so he had decided to go out of his way to see if Steve was okay. But for Steve, he was so paranoid. And so he believed that Matt was sent there by the Avengers to help support Steve Rogers or to possibly stop him. But in reality, it was just Matt being like a good friend, wanting to make sure that his friend was okay. Either way, you have Steve begin to beat down on Matt Murdock at the very end of our last video. And matter of fact, with that battle ending, it leads into the opening pages for this video right here. You see, after you have Steve Rogers being able to beat the living you-know-what out of Matt Murdock and walk away, you had Crossbones arrive. Now, this is the first time that Crossbones or Matt Murdock is meeting one another. And the reason why I'm saying that, because to Crossbones, he's kind of like, who in the world is this guy right now in a devil suit just knocked out? Now, Matt Murdock, he is pretending to be knocked out. And the only reason why, because his body is badly hurting right now, thanks to Steve Rogers giving him that beat down earlier. And so he knows that he cannot fight against Crossbones at the moment. And so right now, it's just Matt pretending to be knocked out. Now for Crossbones, he's kind of like, listen, I have a mission to complete, but at the same time, I want to know who you are under that mask. And so you have Crossbones lift up the mask to see Matt Murdock's secret identity. Now for Crossbones, he has no idea who Matt Murdock is, but he now knows what he looks like. And so you have Crossbones walk away to go complete his supposed mission. And so we kind of find out that Crossbones, his mission right now is to go after the Kingpin. Now, in our last video, we had learned that there is a drug war happening in Manhattan. Now, we already know we have a new drug out there called ice, but we have no idea who's right now trying to create and push that drug in Manhattan. But the Kingpin, he's also trying to sell drugs in Manhattan, but it's not ice that he is selling. And so, of course, we have a drug war. And so for Crossbones, his boss said, hey, I need you to go after the Kingpin. The problem is Crossbones had no idea that the Kingpin had somebody to watch over him, and that would be Typhoid Mary. Now, Typhoid Mary is not really able to take down Crossbones, but luckily for her and also the Kingpin, Daredevil arrives. Now, when he does arrive, it is hilarious because for Kingpin, he's kind of like, Matt Murdock, Daredevil, my worst enemy, is now here trying to protect me. What in the world is going on here? But for the Kingpin, this is the perfect time to try to escape. And so he does, while you have Matt try to fight against, well, Crossbones. But now we jump over to Steve Rogers, and when we do, we're getting a good look of how bad things have come for Steve Rogers while being on ice. Because now it's Steve Rogers saying like, okay, you know what? I'm now becoming more paranoid. I'm now hearing voices inside my head. Those voices are people I've met over the years who are now telling me that I am not even a good Captain America. And that is a huge problem. Now, Steve knows that he needs to rest, but the problem is the ice drug in his system is telling him to keep pushing on. And so he's trying to push on. But now we have to jump over to Diamondback. Now, in Marvel Comics, originally, Diamondback was a bad guy. But then, by this point in Marvel's timeline, she was a good guy. Matter of fact, she was a love interest for Steve Rogers. You know what? Even on top of that, she's also part of a love triangle with her, Steve Rogers, and also John Jameson. Now, these two characters, they're trying to work together to hopefully find Steve Rogers, but then they are confronted by the Black Widow. Now, for the Black Widow, in our last video, she had no idea that Diamondback is a good guy, and so she had attacked her believing that she did something to Steve Rogers, not knowing that she is now a good guy. And so you have Black Widow apologize, but now want to help them to find Steve Rogers before things get a whole lot worse. But getting back over to Crossbones, you have Crossbones being able to take down Daredevil very easily. But once you have Crossbones do that, he realized that the Kingpin got away. Now, when he goes back into the office of the Kingpin, he also realized that Matt Murdock also got away as well. And so for Crossbones, this mission is a complete failure. And so now he's afraid to call up his boss. Now, for Matt Murdock, he's going to go ahead and leave the book for the time being because Homeboy needs his rest. He got his butt kicked twice in one night. Steve Rogers and also Crossbones. But for the Kingpin, he wants to know who in the world is trying to go to war with him when it comes to drug in his city. And so the Kingpin, he believes that sooner or later Bullseye should be able to get that information for him. Now, we do learn who Crossbones is working for, which honestly, there's no big surprise here. It's the Red Skull. He's the other person on the other side of this drug war at the moment. He's the one who's currently pushing ice into Manhattan. But getting back over to our heroes, Diamondback, John Jameson, and also Black Widow, they do find Steve Rogers. But here comes the big problem. Steve Rogers does not believe he is on drugs. They're telling him like, dude, you're on drugs right now and we're here to help you. But the problem is the ice drug in his system is making him more aggressive, making him more paranoid than usual, because now he believes that the heroes are against him. He believes that they're there to stop him. And so you have Steve just being that aggressive hero, trying to beat down on them. Now, after a few pages, you do have Black Widow find a way to get close enough to Steve Rogers to knock him out, to finally take him back home. But as we jump back over to Crossbones, you have Crossbones telling Red Skull everything that happened when it came to his attempt to assassinate the Kingpin. But while you have the two characters talking, they have no idea that outside the building is Bullseye, who's working for the Kingpin, who's right now trying to get ready to kill off the Red Skull. And so as we jump into the second chapter, it's really more of us now picking up with Bullseye just being able to break into the room where the Red Skull is at and shoot the Red Skull right in the head. And so now we're kind of left to believe that the Red Skull is now officially dead. And so you have Crossbones trying his best to fight against Bullseye. Now, after a while, you do have Bullseye being able to get away from Crossbones. But now it seems like the Red Skull is dead, but not really. You see, you have Crossbones find out that the Red Skull is not dead. That matter of fact, it was a robot that was pretending to be the Red Skull. Now for Crossbones, he does feel somewhat bad because he did technically let his boss get shot in the head. But at the same time, it's kind of like, well, I don't feel that bad because it was a robot that got shot in the head. But for Bullseye, he believes that he had officially killed off the Red Skull. But as we check in on Steve Rogers, you have our heroes wondering if Steve is going to be okay. Now, for the doctor there, he tells them like he doesn't know. Because honestly, when it comes to Steve's blood sample, it's very unique. With the combination of the super soldier serum, but also the ice drug as well, it's a whole new type of game for the doctor. And he says, listen, we now must wait for Henry Pym to show up because only Henry can possibly figure out how to help out Steve Rogers. Now, you also have the Black Widow leave the book, but before she does tell Diamondback, like, hey, listen, I see great things for you coming down the road, and I'm hoping that you and I can work together again down the road as a team, but also hoping I can show you some of my moves as well. And there goes the Black Widow. She leaves the book. But you didn't have Bullseye call up the Kingpin and say, hey, boss, listen, I was able to take out the Red Skull. He is good as dead. Now, for Bullseye, he thinks like everything is A-okay. And matter of fact, you have the Kingpin say, cool, I'm going to pay you. But the Kingpin knows there's no way that the Red Skull is dead that easily. It's the Kingpin saying, nah, sooner or later, we might have another run-in with the Red Skull down the road. And honestly, the Kingpin is right because we do see the Red Skull is alive and well. Now, the Red Skull, he knows there's somebody in his organization that is actually working for the Kingpin, but at the same time, he has somebody in the Kingpin's group as well. But either way, it's the Red Skull now heading over to Manhattan. But now we have to jump back over to Steve Rogers. Now, when we do, it's Steve Rogers once again hallucinating, except this time it's a pretty harsh round of hallucinations because you now have Steve Rogers being confronted by Dr. Erskine when it comes to his hallucinations. Now, the doctor is basically telling him that the super soldier serum is a drug. And so for Steve Rogers, he can't believe that he's out there trying to have a war on drugs, but in reality, his powers came from a drug. Now, once you have Steve Rogers being able to overcome these hallucinations, you have the rest of his friends walk into the room, including Hank Pym. And it's Steve Rogers saying like, Hank, I need help. It's the drugs. It's doing a number to me. I am constantly hallucinating. Please help me out. Now, we do get a couple of pages where it's really the Red Skull trying to figure out who in his camp is actually a spy for the Kingpin. But at the same time, he's also wanting to set up a meeting with the Kingpin as well to hopefully work out some kind of deal. And so you have the Red Skull tell Crossbones, hey, I need you to get in contact with the Kingpin instantly. But as we jump back over to Hank Pym, is Hank Pym now telling us, the readers, that the only way to help out Steve Rogers is to give him a blood transfusion. But here comes the big problem with that, though, because if Hank Pym does pull out the blood of Steve Rogers, he's also pulling out the super soldier serum, which means that Steve Rogers will no longer be Captain America. Now, for Hank, he's really hoping here that once they go through the blood transfusion, if he's able to clean the blood, meaning that get rid of the ice that's in the blood, he should be able to give Steve his blood back to allow Steve to be, once again, Captain America. But the problem is, it's a huge if. We don't know if this game plan is truly going to work out. But as we jump back over to the Kingpin, we see the Kingpin right now at the Yankee Stadium. And the reason why, because it's going to be the meeting spot for him and the Red Skull. By the way, we also going to find out the Yankees lose to the Red Sox 26-2, which honestly is pretty wild to see. But either way, the two bad guys are now going to meet up very soon. But now we have to jump over to Steve Rogers. Now, when we do, it's really more of Steve Rogers kind of wondering, like, can he still be Captain America without the super soldier serum? But either way, he does leave the base of the Avengers. And the reason why, because he has something to prove that he can still be Captain America. And so he just walks out. Now, he is confronted by Peggy Carter, who's right now begging him to not leave. But again, he has to prove something. He has to prove no matter what, he'll still be Captain America. And so he walks out. For the second chapter, it does close the Kingpin meeting up with the Red Skull. And the question is right now, how will this meeting truly go? But you also have Steve Rogers continue on trying to prove that he can still be Captain America. But as we jump into the third and final chapter for today's video, we pick up with the Red Skull and the Kingpin's meeting. Now, the Red Skull and the Kingpin, they have never truly gotten along. I mean, like, guys, the Red Skull and the Kingpin, they truly do hate each other a lot. And matter of fact, we kind of saw that back in Acts of Vengeance crossover. But for the Red Skull, it's him telling the Kingpin right now, hey man, listen, I don't plan on leaving here. I don't plan on basically telling you that I will go ahead and stop my entire operation when it comes to me selling ice. I plan on continuing to push ice into your territory. Now, for the Kingpin, also the Red Skull, they agreed to fight against each other in a one-on-one battle. If the Red Skull wins, then the Kingpin must not stop the Red Skull at all when it comes to him pushing ice in the Kingpin territory. But if the Kingpin wins, then the Red Skull must sell his ice operation over to the Kingpin. Now, for me personally, it kind of seems like the Red Skull going to win either way here. But either way, you do have the Kingpin agree to have this one-on-one battle with the Red Skull. Now, for Steve Rogers, he's kind of wondering why in the world is the stadium light still on still at Yankee Stadium? It's 2 o'clock in the morning. And so that is how he's able to find out about the Red Skull and the Kingpin fighting against one another. And so now we have to jump over to their battle. Now, when it comes to the battle between the Red Skull and also the Kingpin, we can say here that both characters are evenly matched for one another. And let me explain. You see, for the Red Skull, he may have speed on his side, but the Kingpin is very durable. But then for the Kingpin, he may be stronger than the Red Skull, but the Red Skull moves too fast for the Kingpin to easily hit. Both characters are evenly matched for one another, but either way, the battle does continue on. Now, for a brief moment, we go back over to the base of the Avengers, and the reason why, because you have Diamondback realize that Steve Rogers is gone, and so she tells John and also Hank, like, hey guys, he's gone, Cap left, and we gotta find him right now. But as we jump back over to Steve Rogers, you have Steve Rogers arrive at Yankee Stadium. Now, Crossbones saw Steve Rogers land, and so you have those two characters battling against one another. But here's the thing. You see, for Steve Rogers, while he fights against Crossbone, you have the Red Skull and the Kingpin continue on with their battle. Now, I kind of want to focus more on the Steve Rogers battle. And here's the reason why. Because for Steve Rogers, he's no longer a super soldier. The serum is gone from his body. And so it's him right now just trying his best to fight against Crossbone. Now, luckily for Steve, by the time we do get to the very end of this storyline, you do have Steve being able to defeat Crossbones, but just barely. Now down below, you have the Kingpin also being able to take care of the Red Skull. So those two characters are the winners. Now, by the time you have Steve Rogers being able to get over to the Red Skull and also the Kingpin, the battle is over. But you have the Kingpin tell Steve Rogers that he was the one who was able to stop the Red Skull. That the Red Skull, for some strange, crazy reason, wanted to battle against the Kingpin. But the Kingpin took that battle on and he won and he saved the city. And so right now, Manhattan is in his debt. Now, for Steve Rogers, he's kind of like, you know what? Whatever. I am done with this mess. I'm going to go ahead and walk away. But technically, this is the ending for Streets of Poison. And so this is where we're going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next comic book video.